been said that the true measure of a community is how it treats its most vulnerable members. Here in South Palm Beach County, we can all be proud of how we have answered the call for help over 4 decades through Jewish Family Services. JFS has served as a lifeline for countless neighbors during their time of greatest need. And while we've been fortunate to have an entire community of generous, active humanitarians, in Ruth and Norman Rales, we were blessed with 2 uncommon ambassadors of caring and compassion. Beacons of light and kindness, Ruth and Norman were, quite simply, help, hope, and humanity personified. The more you know about Ruth and Norman, the more you can appreciate what a great honor it is to have this agency bear their names.
Norman was larger than life, but mostly he was just really caring and giving, and the kind of person who, with all his good fortune, never forgot from whence he came.
Born in 1923 in New York City, Norman Rales' mother died in childbirth when he was 5. 2 years later, unable to find steady work during the Great Depression, his father placed Norman and 2 of his 7 siblings in the Hebrew Orphan Asylum. When Norman turned 17, the director of the orphanage escorted him out the front gates, giving him a $5 bill and a toothbrush. America was now his to conquer. Norman made his way across the country to find work. Eventually, he found his way to Miami, where he met the love of his life, Ruth Abramson. They eventually moved to Ruth's hometown of Pittsburgh, where Norman was given the chance to work with Ruth's family in the home improvement business. Norman excelled in business and eventually founded his own company. Despite his remarkable success as a businessman, Norman always put his family first. For both Norman and Ruth, family was the center of their world.
Ruth was laser focused on her family. She was the quintessential mother, and those Rales boys were her life.
She was always there for us, and I can't tell you what that has done for our emotional security and our outlook on life.
When I was home, my time was with my children, and I had made a pact with my wife that no matter who calls, when I'm with the children, tell them I'm up the street, and as soon as I get back, I'll call him. And President Ford called me, and she said, Mr. President, he's up the street, and as soon as he gets back, he'll call you. Now, my kids heard that, and they said, the President of the United States is calling you, Dad, and here he's spending his time with us. So when you're with your children, be with them. Just let them know how important they are.
Norman and Ruth set up residence in South Florida in the early 80s and brought their great and abounding desire to help others with them. Never forgetting his humble beginnings, JFS was the perfect partner. On the 10-year anniversary of the founding of JFS, we were honored with a game-changing and name-changing blessing.
My wife was pretty ill. I wanted to dedicate a place to her.
The agency was now known as Ruth Rales Jewish Family Service. In doing so, JFS was able to greatly expand its vital programs and services to the South Palm Beach community. After Norman's passing in 2012, the agency was renamed to honor his many years of dedication and commitment. When Norman died in 2012, I got introduced to his sons, primarily Josh Rales. And through many conversations with Josh, he said to me, what is it that you aren't doing in your community that you would like to be doing? And through those conversations, we were able to start our Center for Families and Children, which really allowed the agency to expand our breadth of services further. Some of which included summer camp scholarships for children who needed not necessarily to go to camp to have a great time, but their families needed to continue working so that they could not be home alone unattended. We started a domestic abuse program, which I know would have been very important to Ruth. Throughout that whole process of working with Josh to start the Center for Families and Children, it was always the essence of Ruth and Norman coming through because children were so important to them. Now known as Ruth and Norman Rales Jewish Family Services, we are fulfilling a shared vision of providing a lifeline for our community's most vulnerable. The elderly, who need transportation to doctor's appointments or a call from a friendly neighbor. Our Holocaust survivors, who rely on us for essentials and for social activities. Families, struggling to afford life's basic necessities. And our neighbors in crisis. It would be impossible to estimate the impact that Norman and Ruth Rales have had on our community and all of the individual lives touched by their generosity. The legacy of Ruth and Norman Rales continues to illuminate our agency's path forward and is the guiding light for everything we do, providing the programs and services that Ruth and Norman would be proud of.
I hope that the legacy of Ruth and Norman Rales inspires everyone to continue supporting the incredible work that Jewish Family Services does in our community.
It is now up to all of us to keep their legacy alive. As Norman always showed us, the gift is in the giving.
Oh, what a wonderful feeling that is. My God, how you made someone's life a little better.